Now, in the last segment, I talked about how Congress wanted to go after soft money, money that wasn't regulated by federal law, and issue ads. These were ads that purported to talk about a particular legislative issue, but they did so in a manner that you knew they were going after a particular candidate. But there was something else that Congress wanted to stop. They were a little embarrassed by some of the fundraising scandal that went on during the 1996 presidential election between Bill Clinton and Bob Dole. Contributors got to have coffee with the president at the White House. Big contributors got to sleep a night at the Lincoln bedroom. Congress was embarrassed by that and wanted to put a stop to it. So Title I of McCain-Feingold goes after soft money. Title II goes after issue ads. And Title I gets down to business pretty quickly. The text of the act reads as follows. A national party committee of a national party, including a national congressional campaign committee of a national party, may not solicit, receive, or direct to another person a contribution, donation, or transfer of funds, or any other thing of value, or spend any funds that are not subject to the limitations, prohibitions, and reporting requirements of this act. In other words, no soft money. The other provisions of Title I really just try to close loopholes. States can't touch soft money. Candidates can't touch soft money. Can't make soft money contributions to a nonprofit corporation. Then the law specifies increases in contribution limits. The original contribution limits were pretty low. They were set back way in the 70s. Now, an individual can contribute about $2,000 to a campaign, about $5,000 to a PAC, a political action committee, or a national party committee like a Democratic National Committee or Republican National Committee. For their part, committees like PACs, they can contribute $5,000 to a candidate or another committee. And those amounts are indexed for inflation, so they're going to change about every 2 years. Title II goes after electioneering communication. And this is a really broad term. It's intended to be broad because the law wanted to cover all of the radio and TV ads that we hear and see during an election. If an ad is on broadcast or cable or satellite and it refers to a candidate by name and it's run within 30 days of a primary or 60 days of an election, and if it's aired in the relevant area, where the vote's going to take place, it's subject to McCain-Feingold regulation. A couple of important things to keep in mind. First of all, there are some pretty strict disclosure requirements. The government wants to know, and the government wants everybody to know, who paid for this ad. A disclosure report has to be filed within 24 hours of the expenditure. And if somebody spent more than $1,000, the government wants to know their name. The other thing to keep in mind is this concept of coordination. If a group funded a particular ad and they coordinated with a candidate that maybe is sort of, has the same view about a particular issue, that counts as a campaign contribution. You have to be pretty careful because you don't want to go over your contribution limits. Section 214 of the Act goes into more detail about this idea of coordination. And now we're not just talking about coordination of an ad, but coordination in general. In fact, the law requires the FEC to expand this definition of coordination. You don't have to pick up the phone and talk to the candidate for it to be considered coordination. You could do something as innocuous as distributing the same leaflets. That could be considered coordination, and that could be considered a contribution to the campaign. You could go over your limits, and you could be in big trouble, like going to jail trouble. The other thing to keep in mind about this idea of coordination is that the media is exempt. The media can say anything it wants to about a candidate. But even the media has to be careful. There were 2 DJs in Washington State. Now, they didn't get busted under McCain-Feingold. It was a Washington State campaign finance law that had an identical provision. They went on the air because they were DJs, and they touted their support for a particular provision that was in front of the voters at the time to roll back gas taxes in the state of Washington. A judge actually ruled that that was coordination. The Washington State Supreme Court is going to take a look at it, but there's an example where even the media could lose its exemption. Now, the rest of the act, kind of some common sense provisions that, frankly, I thought were law before this. You can't use campaign funds for personal use. You can't use the federal property for fundraising. No more coffees in the White House for big donors. No contributions from foreigners. The Senate, in an investigation, found an awful lot of circumstantial evidence that Chinese nationals with connections to the Chinese Communist government had actually funneled money into the Clinton-Gore campaign. And then McCain-Feingold brought that kind of silly comment that a lot of people make fun of. I'm Joe Smith, that I approve this ad. A candidate actually has to state that in their advertising if they are to qualify for the best rates for their ad. Now, campaign finance reform, even though it has a great name and you think it's going to do great things, was actually pretty controversial. It was litigated, like a lot of major law, and it went before the appeals court in Washington, and they pretty much approved the whole thing, and then it went to the Supreme Court. In my next segment, I'm going to talk about what the Supreme Court said about this act.